Awkwardly Zen, and I'm actually really excited that Charity has invited me to help keep track of everything in MC for her Lessons of Charity event, which is what you're at right now. This is Charity Mainville, and she is such a amazing person who has so much knowledge about the topic of human design. And so she did a presentation for Awkwardly Zen a couple years ago that was one of the most talked about that we've ever had, certainly the most viewed on our YouTube channel. And so when she said, hey, could I do this continuation of that video, we were like, absolutely, let's team up and do that. So I'm really excited. Charity's going to run you through a lot of information today. Again, this will be recorded, so you do not need to panic about any of missing anything, because you can always go back and watch it on either the Lessons of Charity or the Awkwardly Zen YouTubes. And so with that, I am going to spotlight Charity here. And Charity, let me pass it to you and we can get going.
Hi guys. Okay, so I just want to, if you guys have not seen the first lecture that I did in 2022, it's totally fine. You don't have to. I'm not going to repeat a lot of the things that I did say in that video. This is more going to be focusing on understanding what global cycles are in human design, what is coming, and then kind of comparing like current events of what's going on so you can see how these energies work, especially if you have these gates or incarnation crosses as well. I am going to drop the link though to the first lecture right there in the chat. So that way, if you do want to watch it, you can. It's more about the first lecture was more about what was going on at the time. So that was like, right during COVID. And then also about the mutation of like when it started in 1781 and why we are these considered homo transitorius whatever species according to Ra. So if you are not familiar with human design, you don't need to be, but some of the concepts and the terms that I'll be using, you might be a little confusing. Just know that this is how it's supposed to be focusing mostly on just what this affects us on the global scale and the collective and society and what is considered coming. This is a chart that's by Genetic Matrix. If you have ever gotten your human design chart, there's a lot of different platforms you can use to get a free one. But I use personally Genetic Matrix. Now, on all of your charts, you're going to see, let's see, I'm going to use this, an incarnation cross, right? Like you see mine here, which I don't know, the really horrible way of circling there. Sorry about that. And this is made up from your top 4 gates. So you got your the personality and then design, sun and earth. Okay. So your incarnation cross represents your purpose or theme, like that shapes how you interact with the world and influences your experiences with energies and motivations in relation to an overarching theme. Now, I'm not obviously going to go through every single incarnation cross because there's a lot of them, but the cross, like I said, is determined by the top 4 gates in your chart. And this is because it makes up 70% of your personality. Your incarnation cross never changes, but your motivations and energies surrounding it can influence it in different ways depending on the transits that run through the sun and the earth approximately every 6 days. So this is kind of an example of a transit calendar, but you can see here where it shows like the sun gate and earth gate, which is gate 62 and 61. Now, I don't have 61 or 62, of course, in my top 4 gates, but I do have my throat defined. So 62 is definitely going to impact me. So that's going to, how I express myself is going to be more in detail, or maybe it's going to be like how I speak will be more in a scientific way during this transit. And that's when it comes with the unexpected. My incarnation cross is one of the unexpected, which means I have unexpected events that happen that throw me into kind of these leaderships or a voice of influence. And so that's how like the transits can impact you. Now, these experiences can change you, of course, temporarily, or they'll make a lasting impact on how you express yourself. But it's what it's doing, its purpose is to drive you towards like a personal evolution. It's involving you into the whatever purpose you have in this life. So if you want to look at it another way, you can think of this as like your incarnation cross as being 70% of your DNA. So the DNA is the core structure that stays locked in a cellular vault in our bodies, right? So, but just as the DNA then is described by RNA, and influenced by environmental factors through epigenetics, the incarnation cross is influenced by transits. So that's kind of, it leads you to this personal growth and evolution. I hope that makes sense. So you can also think about that as for the Earth, right? So if you think of global cycles working on the planet, they are the DNA and RNA of Earth, and the assigned incarnation crosses that drive the evolution for the collective, humanity overall, impacting trends and behaviors and social structures. But instead of having one incarnation cross, it has two, which is the vessel of love and the Sphinx. Now, what makes these two crosses unique is because they hold the gates of our identity and where our magnetic monopole sits, which is where our identity center, but it's where all the energy that draws in through our identity center. So the magnetic monopole is bringing in your events, the people in your life, all the changes. And so this is also bringing it on through the global scale. And so the vessel of love is the evolution of universal love and acceptance of others. And it works on a global scale by spreading the energies of compassion, unity, and empathy, helping humanity embrace love and connection in all aspects of life while fostering social harmony, encourages altruism, and supports the integration of diverse communities through a foundation of love. And it's made up of these four gates. The second one is the Sphinx. And this guides the evolution and direction and clarity by offering a sense of purpose and direction. It helps societies and individuals align with their path and make it purposeful decisions to help navigate periods of uncertainty, steers humanity towards constructive goals and shared visions for the future. And these are considered the locks of the global cycles. So when you're looking at the breakdown of the cycles, this is what global cycles looks like in human design. So this is what is called the great year. Now, these are considered or the current precessional cycle. So the one that we are in currently started in 16,513 BC, and it goes until 3,674 AD. Now, these precessional cycles relate to something called, it has to do with the precession of the equinoxes, which is also where the slow wobble of the Earth and rotation axis that causes the position of the equinoxes to shift over time. Now, these cycles can last anywhere from 19,000 to 26,000 years. Well, the one, like I said, that we're in currently is about 20,000. And these phases correspond to precession through each of the 12 astrological signs, forming the whole cycle overall. Now, what is fascinating about this is that there is significant climate and environmental changes that happen approximately every 19 to 26,000 years due to axial precession, which is where it alters Earth's orientation relative to the sun, which is something called part of the Milankovitch cycles, along with the shifting of the continents called continental drift. Now, this can take tens of millions of years, but there are significant geological activities that happen every 20,000 years due to these kind of small scale tectonic processes. So in a way, you could think of it like Earth, it's like a mini Earth death that resets itself and renews the ecosystem through these variations in climate, and then shapes the land by tectonic activity and volcanic eruptions. So it's kind of intriguing if you think about it, because it's kind of, with all of these cycles, there's usually some kind of rebirth, but also an extinction, which the cycle does talk about. So the prediction with the 2027 human design thing, it does talk about an extinction to the human species, Homo sapiens, us. Of course, this isn't due to happen until 3,674 AD, and that, of course, can't be proven. However, I'll go into that in a little bit. But what is intriguing is that we're Homo sapiens, right? So if you look at we're the Homo genius, we're actually the longest species of the Homo genius to live as long as we have, that were created during the time other species was born. So you may not be aware, but there was, I think it's 8 other type of humans back in the day. And the last one to evolve was the Homo floresiensis, also known as the hobbits. And they were born approximately 100,000 to 6,000 years ago, but they're also extinct at this point. So we're overdue, I guess you can say, in a way, for extinction. But like I said, it's not going to affect us in this timeline. Another thing with the 2027 prediction that I want to mention is that it's kind of a dark prediction. And Ra made it very clear, like, it's considered a cosmic fairy tale. He's like, obviously he can't say for sure if it's going to happen. They don't know what's going to happen once the Rave are born, all these things. But what people don't really understand, because they've changed the narrative of the prophecy a lot, is that it actually doesn't really affect us in the first 400 years. So if you look at this, right, we're in this cycle here. We're in the cross of planning, and then we're going into the cross of sleeping phoenix. But the actual events that are considered darker or the really challenging times are within the cross of contagion. Because when he gave the prophecy, he gave it till the end of the time. And so we're not going to be affected by it. It doesn't mean that 2020, like the next phase we go into, is peachy keen, because there's definitely challenges. But when it comes to like the super dark stuff, like we're not part of that. So, but I will say, like, if anybody's watching this video 400 years later, I'm really sorry. That sucks. Okay. So with that being said, oh, sorry, that was my little notes there. And then, so within the whole cycle, so within this whole chart here, right, within the whole 26,000 years, 20,000 years, there's these things called rounds. Now, these rounds are these phases that last about 4,000 years that have two ages within the cycle. Okay, so it's the same incarnation crosses. So the locks here, they start here, right, and they go through the cycle of the same ones. You see these, they don't change. They flip spots, but they don't change, because one will take the forefront and the other one is the backup to kind of make sure that job is done, and then they trade places once the cycle is completed. So, and if you look at this, what's intriguing about this is that it also looks like the double helix of DNA. Hence, it kind of locks up the Earth's overall core and frequency. So now each round is signified by one of the lines. So if you have a profile, like my profiles, I'm a 3-6, but the lines are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're currently in the 6 here. And so every gate that's within it as well is going to have, I'm sorry, 1 second here. Sorry. Yeah. So we're in the 6th epoch. So we're in the last kind of round here of this. We've gone through all there. And so at the beginning, it was the locks were, the one is about investigation, goes down to transition. So we're kind of in this transiting time period. I'm so sorry, you guys. I have not slept very well. So I know this can get really complicated. So I just ask that you kind of bear with me as I go through all of this. But so, like I said, now there's also within these rounds, there's these things called quarters. And so when you're looking at your chart, you're going to see your incarnation cross, and it's going to say, unexpected too. So it means that my incarnation cross is in the quarter of civilization. So it has to do with the form of the body. And I can't go through every one because it does make a difference on whether you're a right or left angle or juxtaposition, because like I said, there's 768 different incarnation crosses with these 112 individual themes, but there's only 14 themes for the global cycles, which I'm going to explain that one in a moment. So these are the types of quarters. So this correlates with the evolution of how things are made. So whatever specific quarter, it changes the positions of the gates as well, and the conscious and the unconscious sun. It's kind of like a little bit of musical chairs. So all of these are the same, but they kind of switch positions. Now, I just want to touch on these. I'm not going to go through them all, but the last round puts us in the vessel of love in the quarter of initiation, which is at the forefront, and which is what most people have been talking about in regards to the cross of the sleeping phoenix. But there is another part of this, which is the cross of the sphinx, and it puts us in the quarter of mutation. So that change is coming through, and also with the cross of penetration. So, and if you look at this in a way too, we know that if you look at the quarters and see to want to understand kind of how they work, we know like the earliest civilization on record supposedly is about 4,500 to 4,000 BC. So, and this is early civilization. It's got like significant contributions to human history and like regarding like development of writing, architecture, all that. And that was in the quarter of civilization with initiation, but most likely there has been debates on whether or not it started earlier. And if we were, to believe the story of Atlantis, this would have started in this phase of civilization. So that means the civilization could have existed prior to that. And this all has to do with how we evolutionally evolve, right? So how the earth forms. I really do hope that makes sense. Now, within these rounds, so this is like I said, this is a round, we have these epochs. So that's what these individual sections are. So and this is approximately 411 years. And when I said that the great year has to do with the precession of the signs, within the middle here, like, which is actually what we're coming up to, the cross of the sleeping phoenix here, it switches signs. So, this was considered the age of Pisces, and now we're going into the age of Aquarius, supposedly, right? And so that's why that's one reason why this shift coming is such a significant one. But to kind of understand this even more, like I said, these are the locks and these are the keys. So these keys unlock this background frequency. All right. So the themes and the energies of the epochs are ruled by the keys, and they manifest more directly and clearly in collective behaviors, like trends, society changes, and they're usually marked by like some prominent shifts and like easily identifiable patterns. But to understand like how the locks work, like when we're in this shift here, you see there's no keys unlocking this frequency. So it's just the time of the lock. There's nothing else involved in this. And so during those times, those epochs are ruled by more like indirect or influencing behaviors to the collective in less obvious ways. It's kind of like what happens in these when these locks switch impacts the entire round. So for example, like if you look at this here, right, this is where 33 BC to 37 AD. Well, obviously Jesus Christ was born during this lock. Now, Christianity originated during this time and these teachings, but I mean, after this lock. So during this time, this is when Jesus Christ was born, all this stuff was going through, but Christianity really didn't start until the 4th century, which is right here. So it's kind of like this is where all of this is building up to put us towards the phase of the next round. I really hope that makes sense. So within there, there's these 8 cycles. So sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, but yeah, 8 cycles. And the first one starting with the lock itself, like I said, and then these 7 subcross with these 4 gates, each lasting approximately 400,000 years. And within these locks, and within these epochs, there's also these lines, which I'll go through in a second here. But if you're looking at just like what these epochs are, right, there's 14 primary incarnation crosses, and it's rooted in the structure and the progression of like the human design system. The reason why these 14 are chosen is because they reflect key shifts in the collective consciousness and societal structures. So if you have one of these crosses, it is significant whether we're in that time period or not. Like your energy is meant to kind of influence the collective consciousness in a way that you are probably unaware of. And if it is in the cross that we're coming into, I'm going to explain that a little bit later. But each cross brings different challenges, opportunities, areas of focus, and facilitates growth and development on a collective scale. Okay. And also it has to do with the alignment of the astrological ages, because these global cycles correspond to the astrological signs and how they progress through the zodiac. Now, and understand too, like these, like as we're coming into the incarnation cross of the sleeping phoenix, they don't happen overnight. Like these transitions overlap. So there's usually about around 40 years prior into 30 years after, kind of like there's a buffer period where the energies start coming into play, and then they kind of leave this residual effect. Now, like I said, within each of these epochs, there is a breakdown of the cycles as well, and the lines within the cycles that happen every around approximately 70 years. And I know this can be super confusing, but I'll break this down. Like I'm going to break this down for you for each key and lock. So I'm going to trust that you're going to start seeing kind of how this unfolds as like I give real world examples. But you can see right now, like it starts off with a line 6 and it in 1615, and this was when Mayflower landed on the United States. Well, it wasn't the United States then, but now it is. And it goes all the way 653, and we're in the line 1, which has to do with the foundation and investigation. And then we'll be switching to a line 6. So if you are a line 1 in your profile, if you have a lot of line 1s in your chart, you probably feel very comfortable about around this time period. Like it's kind of like you feel like this is your time that you were born for. If you are a line 6, you're probably not feeling that way, but you're going to around 2027. So there's going to be a shift for people that have line 6s. It's very impactful if you are a line 6 or if you have a lot in your chart. As for those with a line 1, might start to be feeling kind of like, ooh, I feel a little uneasy about what's been going on, or they feel like the shift coming. They'll probably sense it, kind of the energy around it. And as I was talking about evolution of DNA, and so I just wanted to kind of explain what I mean by why I keep using the DNA references, because human design is made up of a lot of different systems, but one of them is the I Ching. And the I Ching is said to be directly related to our DNA. And they don't really know how that's possible because the I Ching was written 5,000 or 4,000 years ago. It's the oldest divination system written. It's one of the oldest books called the Books of Changes. But it's kind of interesting if you compare the DNA concept to even human design or even astrology, because there are planetary influences as well. And the reason why I bring this up is because Ra was really adamant about explaining that human design is part of our genetic makeup. He did not like thinking of human design as something wooey. He wanted it to be very much based in science, and he kept saying like he wanted people to look at it as like, this isn't a belief system, this is an experiment. You should try it to see if it works for yourself. In addition to that, and two, I mean, if it is indeed part of our DNA, it will be able to be proven after 2027 because he claims of a new human species being born, which would mean that the alteration or mutation of DNA to produce that. And that would suggest, again, too, that the planet itself has its own genome that gets reborn every 20,000 years. And so you can kind of compare it to like the genome being the actual cycle, right? Our chromosomes being the rounds, the genes are the epochs, the base pairs has to do with the two crosses, and then the codons, because we have 64 codons and there's 64 gates. And then SNPs, or these little mutations within these little nucleotides, could be representing the line. And I'm gonna go on my soapbox here for a minute because I do know that a lot of people do not believe in evolution. There's a survey that states that 40% of Americans do not believe that we evolved, and there's actually a lot of schools that don't teach it anymore. And I understand like the main reason behind this is because people don't want to believe that we came from primates, and that's totally fine. It's up to you to believe what you want to believe. Like if you want to believe we came from God or an alien or whatever, your belief system is your own. But I just want to explain that it's really important to understand that evolution is part of it. I mean, it's been proven, scientifically proven. And honestly, like there's some primates out there that behave better than human beings. So I don't think that's a bad thing that we're necessarily related to them. And I'm just going to point out the fact too that, you know, God does not describe what Adam and Eve looked like in the book of Genesis. He did say like in the representation of man, but what was the representation of man at the time? We have no idea. He doesn't talk about their skin color, what type of hair they had, even if they walked on 2 feet. But all he said was that, hey, they were living naked in a garden and then was given an apple. And to me, that kind of sounds a little bit ape-like, right? Because who's living in a forest right now with snakes and eats apples? So just something to keep in mind. But because the creation of Adam and Eve is actually more of a metaphor about the evolution within itself. And I also want to make it clear that like Homo sapiens, us, we didn't directly evolve from primates. We evolved from a different version. There was a person, like a version in between us. But, you know, one thing to say too about evolution is that the evolution means change. So if you don't believe that evolution doesn't exist, that means that you're saying that change doesn't exist. So if we are the same as Adam and Eve, which we know that isn't true, because unless Adam and Eve are, you know, had an iPhone and produced a TikTok video about the new leaf fashion trends. So we know that we evolve, right? So it happens all around us. And it's really important. I just really want to kind of drill that in because it's understanding like this is what this is all based on. So if you don't believe it, it's hard to believe in like the whole concept of human design itself. So I hope that makes sense. All right, so like I said, we have these locks, right? So we talked about the vessel of love and the court, and this is the current one that we're into. So how the locks work, there's one energy, right? That frequency in the background. And this is the time for exploring and embodying the essence of love in various forms. Which in turn initiates profound change and growth. So since we're in the quarter of initiation, this sets the stage for a journey where love in its purest form initiates and supports transformative experiences, because with the cross of the Sphinx in the quarter mutation, both individually and collectively. Now, if you're looking at how this breaks down in the conscious and the unconscious way, right? So this says that the gate 25 and 46 work together to initiate new cycles through spiritual and physical love and encourages individuals to integrate these aspects into their life. And then on the unconscious side, it provides this underlying, less obvious influence that ground the conscious love energies into self-acceptance and collective compassion. The Sphinx, on the backside of this, it also emphasizes guiding and navigating through significant changes and transformation, which obviously we're going through. It's a time for embracing change and finding direction amidst the chaos. So if you're looking at how the gates line up on this one, the gate 1 and 2 work together to initiate and ground new creative impulses with a strong sense of personal direction and purpose, while the unconscious side provides the underlying, less obvious influence that supports collective leadership and direction through strategic collaboration and inclusivity. So when it comes to the keys, we are currently in, so this is what unlocks the vessel of love. And we are currently in the Incarnation cross of planning, and we're switching to the Incarnation cross of the sleeping phoenix. Now, how the Incarnation cross of planning has to do with strong supportive networks and structures that enhance the collective well-being and security. It encourages collaboration and mutual aid, creation of sustainable systems that benefit society as a whole, while promoting the creation and maintenance of effective infrastructure, and enables organization, well-functioning communities, and supports long-term growth and stability, which lines up kind of with, like I said, the landing of the Mayflower, and we built up the United States, and even Canada was around that time too. On the negative side, or what it looks like in a shadow aspect, though, it can also lead to overly rigid and structured systems that stifle innovation and adaptability. It focuses more on maintaining control than meeting these evolving needs. So along with these exclusive or systems that prioritize certain groups over others, and leads to inequality and the lack of inclusivity within these community structures. We're switching, though, to the Incarnation cross of the sleeping phoenix, which is about also, oh, I'm sorry, there's an error there. This is about ability to undergo profound personal and collective transformation. It leads to renewal and regeneration, and it promotes the rebirth of ideas, attitudes, and systems, which allows for growth and while encouraging individuals' empowerment and self-reliance. It fosters the sense of inner strength and the capacity to overcome challenges independently. It supports the development of personal resilience in the pursuit of one's unique path. In the shadow state, though, this can lead to destructive or chaotic changes that disrupt stability and create uncertainty. The aspect may focus in on tearing down these existing structures without a clear vision or constructive rebuilding that leads to turmoil. It may result in extreme individualism, like we've seen with the rise of narcissism as antisocial behaviors, but where self-reliance becomes self-centeredness, and it causes a disconnect from the collective and supports of cooperation. So you can see that this is tribal, collective, and then we're going to individual, tribal, and this is integrated individuality. So this is a dramatic shift. Like, all of our support systems, all of our communities, all of our structures is like going away. It's now about the reliance of the self. As for the Sphinx, the keys that lock this, we are currently in the cross of the Maya, and we're going to be going to the cross of penetration. Now, the Incarnation cross of the Maya promotes this deep understanding of nature of reality, and encourages the exploration of knowledge and refinement so we can perceive and interpret the world around us, supporting the integration of like various forms of knowledge and experience. But it enhances clarity and fosters kind of insight connections between different aspects of reality. So it's exploring like metaphysics, exploring spiritualism, exploring all these different types of individual systems of knowledge. And the negative aspect, though, this can also lead to confusion and misinterpretation of reality, where individuals or societies might get caught up in illusions or misconceptions, so like conspiracy theories, right? Or these false beliefs, which may result in overthinking or paralysis by analysis, where action and practical application are hindered by endless questioning or skepticism. So it's kind of like when we're saying we're going to disregard all these other knowledge that we may have just because we can't prove it. Now, the Incarnation cross of penetration in the positive aspects promotes direct, clear understanding. It allows for penetration of complex situations and really digs into the heart of the matter. It fosters decisive action based in these deep intuitive knowledge and perception, while encouraging straightforward and effective communication. It enables the transmission of insights and ideas with very clear precision and impact. It supports the ability to convey essential truths clearly and convincingly. In the negative aspect, though, it can manifest as blunt or insensitive behavior that may hurt or alienate others. The focus on directiveness might lead to the lack of tact or empathy, causing conflicts and misunderstandings, which results in overwhelming intensity or intrusive behavior. It's where the desire to penetrate and understand becomes this evasive model of disregarding boundaries or the needs of others. So again, like you can see, we're going from these dramatic shifts of like, oh, let's let's keep our mind open, to let's just get in there and do it. And this is also, this has a little bit of the tribal and collective, but we're still looking at the integrative individuality. And when it comes to the integrative individuality, this has to do with the theme of selfishness. And I don't think selfishness is going to be good and bad. So it's how you want to look at it. But one, it's kind of like in the positive aspect, this is about meeting this primal and survival instincts of being human. It has to be with the ultimate individual person. And it's meant to look out for your own survival first. It's the put on your oxygen mask before you can help others. And that's why like you'll continue to kind of see these breakdowns of these collective organizations, like they think government, religion, and even healthcare, right? So, and how the energy manifests is dependent on the keys, which I'm going to break down here. And so you can see really how this works and how the shifting of the energies is working now to what's coming up. So I'm going through these, I'm going to go through these individually. So again, this is just the shift. So like, as you're looking at the keys in these cycles, you can see, like I said, there's a dramatic shift in the overall circuitry, and we're going from mainly collective to individual. Okay, breaking it down. The first key, the first lock we have, this is all has to do with the vessel of love. This is because I have a little heart here. This is the vessel of love, and this has to do with the Sphinx. So this is the time we're in now. Okay, so, and this has to do with the gate 37.1, sorry, and 61.1. Now, an example of this is free love. So the free love movement of the 1970s really embodies all the positive expression of the 25, 37, 13, and 61, because it created transformative and wide-ranging approach to love, relationships, and personal growth. Now, gate 31.1 emphasizes harmony in relationships and communities. The movement advocated for like these open, non-traditional relationships and communal living. And it promotes the free love from social constraints. This unlocked gate 25, which represents the universal unconditional love, encouraging like these diverse and open forms of relationships. Gate 61.1 focuses on occult knowledge and inner truth. So the era's interest in these Eastern philosophies and psychedelics and alternative spiritual practices align with this gate, expanding the understanding of love beyond traditional boundaries, right? So this movement unlocked then gate 13, which involves listening, witnessing, and caring and gaining wisdom from these past experiences. It encourages like reflection of new spiritual and relational knowledge, and it integrates these insights into personal and collective experiences. On the shadow aspect, what this would look like would be the popularity and rise of cults in the 60s and 70s. So in the shadow aspect, the locks and keys lead to manipulation, control, and exploitation within societal movements, seen cults. So 37.1, shadows expression creates communities based on rigid exclusionary foundations. Cults may manipulate relationships and social boundaries to control members, and then they isolate themselves from external influences. It fosters suspicions towards outsiders and demands conformity. So this then exploits the lock of gate 25, representing spiritual disconnect and manipulation. So cult leaders twist spiritual practices and beliefs to exert control, creating these dogmatic environments, and that disconnects individuals from these authentic spiritual experiences. And then you have the gate 13 that's dealing with the collective memory and within the shadow of 61.1. So it's the manipulation by cults to create false narratives on fear-based doctrines and maintaining control and preventing members from questioning their practices or seeking external help. It's kind of like, it manifests like this obsessive search for hidden meanings and truth. And then they distort those concepts to maintain the influence over them. Now, as we're shifting into 2027, we're going to be having, now we're shifting from gate, so just to make that clear, we're going from this to this. So gate 37 to 55 in 2027. What does that look like? Well, this is gate, the positive aspect of this would be the rise of spiritual practices as a career. So the combination of gate 55, 25, 54, and 13 in the line 6 version highlights how spiritual professions can foster personal growth, universal acceptance, and authentic spiritual communities. The gate 55 and the 6 emphasizes personal spiritual integrity and self-awareness among practitioners like psychics and tarot readers, astrologers, human design readers. And this enlightened self-interest allows them to guide others authentically, fostering community grounded in genuine spiritual practices. And then it unlocks gate 25 that promotes that love and acceptance by these diverse spiritual paths, encouraging exploration without judgment. And it creates this kind of rich and exclusive landscape where individuals can find paths resonating with their beliefs and experiences. This is supported through the gate 54 of ambition with the line 6 by selecting paths and relationships that support the spiritual growth, like finding like-minded people and honing in skills, choosing authentic members or mentors, and aligning with supportive networks and spiritual professions that can strengthen practices and contribute to a broader spiritual community, which unlocks gate 13, which is about how spiritual practice professionals are listeners, right? And wisdom sharers. They integrate their personal experiences and professional guidance, and they contribute to a collective narrative that enriches a broader spiritual community. The shadow expression of this, we can see this also with the rise of scammers and those that create these false profiles saying that they're psychics or saying there's something else or calling and taking advantage of monies, right? Because this is how spiritual professions can be exploited, leading to a deception and exploitation of vulnerable individuals. It can lead to self-interest that comes distorted and exploits emotional invulnerability and the spiritual needs of others by using false claims or being this spiritual person when they're really not, to manipulate and defraud people. And then it undermines the trust in the genuine spiritual practices, which unlocks the shadow side of gate 25 by exploiting who deceive people under these guise of spiritual guidance, right? Manipulators extract money or personal information. They leave the individuals feeling betrayed and disillusioned, and then they're damaging their faith in spiritual communities. This is supported by the gate 54-6 with this ambition in that it can lead to unscrupulous behavior because scammers selectively target vulnerable individuals seeking support, and they use those manipulations to fulfill their own ambitions. This causes significant financial and emotional harm, which unlocks 13 as those spiritual professionals of keepers of wisdom are now abused by these scammers who exploit to trust to defraud victims, right? So all that manipulation of that information and financial gain then causes deep wounds within the fundamental principles of a spiritual practice. The next lock we're going into here is gate 46, and we're going to the key of gate 40.1. And in 62.1 and 7. So the good version of this in the light expression is the Great Resignation. And this showcases positive expressions of the locks and keys in shaping societal movements, right? So gate 46 represents the gate of the love of body. And it's where somebody will prioritize their own physical and mental well-being over unsatisfying or unhealthy work environments. It shifts towards self-care and personal integrity and reflects a growing awareness of maintaining a healthy work-life balance. The positive aspect of the gate 40.1 symbolizes the foundation of independence. It's evident as workers seek jobs that respect their personal needs of well-being, or leaves the workforce to focus more on self-care, and the quest for their independence drives this movement as people take control of their lives and prioritize themselves. With gate 62 focusing on the details and routines, they can reevaluate their work-life balance, leveraging details and data to understand work conditions and personal priorities. This then unlocks the gate 7, representing that leadership and decision-making, and adapts to the resignation trend through its positive expression. Like, it's about leaders who use detailed feedback from employees to implement effective changes in their work policies and environments to better equip to support their teams to avoid having a bunch of people resign from their jobs. They take that in and they say, okay, we're listening to this. This is our leadership. We got to change this. So that's kind of how that is expressed. In the shadow of this, handling of the COVID-19 is a really good example of how this works out, because the gate 46, like I said, is the representation of the body, and that is manifested as negatively neglected or self-abuse. And this leads to the overwhelming strain on the healthcare system and disregard for the physical and mental well-being of healthcare workers, also resulting in widespread burnout as they prioritize their patients over their own health. And the gate 40 does extreme demands and inadequate support to lead to this overwork and isolation. The fundamental issues within the healthcare systems is reflected in the excessive workload and the lack of support structure, contributing to the stress and burnout. With gate 62 is then supporting that through an over-reliance on existing work structures and the excessive focus on details and these rigid routines that make it difficult to adapt remote work or changing health guidelines, leading to inefficient and increased stress among these workers. And then of course you have that's going to unlock gate 7 that represents that leadership and decision making. And so that's going to bring in inflexible leadership or enforce, and they're going to enforce these details and rules or these rigid expectations, failing to address the need for flexibility and support. Now we're shifting from gate 40 to gate 59 in sexuality. And this is actually these two gates together, 46 with 59 unlocking 46, that's a big deal because this has a lot to do with intimacy and sexuality. Like these gates work together. They have this kind of same theme in a way, even though gate 46 has to do with like loving your body and appreciating yourself and expressing how you express yourself sexually. Gate 59 is how we connect sexually with other people. So a good example of this in the light expression of how this is influenced by the line 6 is the rise of accountability in relationships and addressing sexual harassment through the Me Too movement. So gate 59.6 focus on transcendence of sexuality and intimacy. So it transforms sexual connections into authentic experiences. The movement, like the Me Too movement, like embodies this energy by demanding accountability and respect in intimate encounters. And then the gate 46 is going to emphasize the body's need for safety and respect, promoting genuine care in physical interactions. It's also by fostering like a culture of respect and consent, and it contributes to healthier, more authentic connections. The gate 56.3, right, also promotes the selective initiation of relationships and projects with positive societal impacts, like platforms like Are We Dating the Same Guy kind of exemplify this fostering of transparency and accounting and dating, which aligns with the gate 53.6's discerning and transformative energy, and unlocks gate 7 by directly directing others towards integrity and accountability. It's a positive expression that kind of improves and leads to improved relationship dynamics and promotes a more respectful behavior, inspiring others to adopt those similar values. The shadow expression of this, though, is also the rise of STIs and the disconnection from genuine intimacy. So like the rise of sexual transmitted diseases that demonstrates the negative expression of gate 59, 46, 53, and 7, because these distortions lead to a misuse of sexual energy, disconnection from that genuine intimacy, selective moral standards, and the lack of accountability in leadership. The misuse or exploitation of these rise of STIs highlights the consequences of unsafe sex practices, and it focuses on the physical pleasure without the emotional depth, and it diminishes like intimate relationships, and it leads to this lack of genuine emotional connection and increases the transmission of infections, and then it fails to align with the transformative potential of gate 59.6. When sexual energy is exploited, it distorts healthy intimacy and the disregard for the body's own wisdom. And this is also then reflected through 53.6 and gate 7, because it reflects the consequences of this lack of accountability and the failure to address the sexual health responsibility. The selective morality undermines this effort to promote safe sex practices and education individuals about the importance of sexual health. Is it's beginning to be removed from schools or banning the word sex altogether, and it perpetuates a culture of neglect and unaccountability where leaders fail to prioritize or address public health issues related to these kind of sexual behaviors, and then it undermines the trust and distorts the role of leadership in upholding the health standards. Because when our leaderships create stigma around it, then it's going to impact how the collective responds to it. The next is switching from the lock of 10 to the key 9, which is our current one, and then 32. Now, the positive example of this one is the rise of meditation. The rise of meditation, obviously, like because gate 9.1 emphasizes focus and mindfulness. It's like meditation aligns with this by involving a consistent efforts to enhance mental clarity, reduce stress, and highlights the importance of building effective practices, establishing these habits that support focus and attention. Gate 10 that unlocks gate 10 that represents the behavior of the self and manifests meditation through promoting authentic self-love and self-care. Practitioners that develop self-awareness and emotional regulation and inner peace reflect that positive aspect of gate 10 and fosters impersonal integrity for balance and enhancing the overall well-being. With that as well, gate 32 represents the conservation and respect for a process. So in meditation, it translates to preserving like this valuable relationship and resources with these detailed, cautious, and respectful approach. And it's about utilizing the resource to foster continuity, and maintain harmony, and it ensures secure outcomes for all parties. And then in the shadow expression, a good example of this is the Satanic Panic of the 1980s. And this has actually been brought up recently too, because I believe that like Stranger Things did an episode around this. And then I think QAnon brought something up about this as well. But this in the shadow aspect in the Gate 9-1 is going to exhibit these obsession fixations on trivial and often misinterpreted details. Now, ordinary behavior, symbols, or accusations were blown out of proportion, and it led to this huge fear and paranoia instead of actually understanding what was really going on. The obsessive focus distorted reality. It interpreted misunderstood signs as evidence of this widespread satanic activity. Now, the obsessive fear-driven focus unlocked the behavior of the self by representing the shadow aspect by communities adopting these rigid, intolerant behaviors based on irrational fears, leading to false accusations, social hysteria, and moral panic. People engaged in fear-driven behaviors, and they also cause widespread harm and societal disruption based on unprompted fears. And then 32.1 also played it through this focus of conservation, primarily overly cautious and resistance to change, leading to a more fear-based approach to protecting these values and resources. All about this, it manifested as a collective fear and moral failure that exaggerated the concerns about traditional values or and encouraged fear-mongering. Now we're switching from the behavior of the self to the light expression. And since this is like an individual power, this is integrated individuality, I thought it would be really good to explain it through what a leadership or what it looks like through leadership, because they are the ones that are going to be enforcing this. So a really good example of this is Vladimir Zelensky, which obviously the president of Ukraine, and it kind of showcases how his leadership during the invasion from Russia, right? So his journey from this comedian to the president, like showcased the profound self-empowerment and personal integrity that aligns with Gate 10, and his resilience and common sense during the invasion reflects the Gate 34.6 as he makes these pragmatic decisions for his country's defense, both through Ukraine and international support. And then with 57.6, he becomes this global role model for encouraging resilience and aligning with Gate 1 as his intuitive adaptation to changing circumstances. Like when things change, he found a different way to try to solve it. And it highlights his ability to navigate complex situations in these with strategic insight. Of course, then the shadow expression of this would be Putin. And with that being said, it's exemplifies the shadow sense of this because it demonstrates this self-grandiose misuse of power, negative role modeling, and manipulative intuition, because Gate 10's biggest shadow is narcissism. And his pursuit of personal power and nationalistic ambitions, it reflects the distorted view of Gate 10, and it overshadows genuine integrity or compassion. His misuse of power led to aggression and suffering, and shows how power driven by ego and authoritarianism contrasts with wise, compassionate leadership. And that being said, then the positive Putin became a symbol of aggression and tyranny, and his leadership through intimidation provides the negative example of 57.6 and 1, because his intuitive strategies are used for manipulation and control rather than positive adaptation. And it highlights how intuition for personal gain undermines the collective good. Okay, and then we're going to the next lock here, which is lock 15, being unlocked by Gate 16, 2, and 42. So a positive expression of this one is the Violence Against Women Act of 1994, because this all has to do with these foundational skills and enthusiastic actions. The Violence Against Women Act embodied this through its proactive commitment to addressing systematic issues of the violence against women, and develops practical skills and the legal frameworks for victim support and violence prevention. And the gate that unlock Gate 15, that represents the love of humanity and acceptance of these diversities. It supports for women reflected this, support for all women, right? So balancing these extremes of violence and to fostering a collective sense of responsibility for well-being. With Gate 42.1, it focuses on growth and diverse growth through, like, it's about finishing out the cycle. And so the initiated legal changes to support and protect women establishes the foundation for these ongoing improvements, with Gate 2 aligning with the societal and legal advancements in protecting women. which was initiated by Gate 42 because the overall direction of the efforts to address violence, ensuring alignment with the broader goals for protection and justice. In the shadow expression, this could be QAnon, and this is because Gate 16.1 of negative expression is misguided enthusiasm and unfounded skills into spreading conspiracy theories and misinformation. This fervent, but kind of like it was a very aggressive but baseless of promoted unfounded claims, distorted facts, creating harmful narratives, and without any empirical support. And this misguided enthusiasm then unlocks Gate 15's vision of harmonious integration, and instead it exacerbates like social extremes, the division of parties, fosters a climate of fear and suspicion, and then it disrupts the climate of the collective harmony and balances, amplifying that misinformation and conspiracy. Line 42.1 is going to promote that chaotic and harmful expression of conspiracy theories, because rather than fostering positive growth, it's going to lay a foundation of disinformation that leads to societal fragmentation and disruption. It's got this erratic growth that undermines constructive societal developments, fostering an environment of distrust and paranoia. Then that expansion will unlock Gates 2, which contributes to the unified plan, disrupts the collective efforts by spreading that misinformation, and then misguides the public's understanding and actions. It prevents clear and constructive societal direction. It leads to confusion and a breakdown of collective goals. But we're switching into Gate 20, that will be unlocking Gate 15. And a positive example of this is the psychedelic use in mental health care. And so this integrates because firstly, Gate 15 reflects the love of humanity and, like I said, acceptance of diverse healing methods as well. So embracing psychedelic therapy demonstrates mental health professionals' commitment to exclusivity and exploring new avenues that they haven't that may have been extreme before. Then Gate 20.6 emphasizes the wisdom of being present and crucial for healing, because psychedelic therapy guides individuals to gain these insights and addresses past trauma in the present moment, and then it facilitates personal profound growth and transformation. With the 51.6, it deals with handling crisis and adapting to new solutions. So as our mental health crisis continues, the psychedelic therapy offers a response to that, helping individuals detach from past traumas and integrate new perspectives that unlocks Gate 2 to innovate these treatment methods. It's the introduction of psychedelics in mental health care signifies a pioneering shift in direction and embraces a scientific-backed approach to revolutionizing mental health care. In the shadow expression, the destruction of the Amazon rainforest for agricultural and enslavement. So this is like the destruction of the rainforest reflects the disregard for the natural diversity and intricate ecosystems. And that aligns with the negative aspect of Gate 15, because the gate represents the love of humanity and acceptance, but they're prioritizing short-term economic gains over environmental and community well-being. And that undermines the Gate 15's principles. And the aggressive clearing of the rainforest shows a failure to appreciate the immediate and long-term environmental and social consequences, reflecting the negative and social impact of the negative expression of 20.6. So they're only thinking about the now. They're not thinking about what this is going to do to us in the long term. And it ignores the impact of biodiversity and climate and reveals a lack of wisdom and foresight, disregarding the urgent need to protect the vital ecosystem. And then with that being said as well, then we have the enslavement of indigenous landowners during the rainforest destruction highlights the perverse form of separation that reflects the negative aspect of Gate 51.6. And this gate deals with responding to crisis and disorder, but exploiting vulnerable communities for personal gain exasperates the devastation and chaos, and further then entraps rightful landowners as indentured slaves. And this unlocks in the Gate 2 negative by signifying the direction of global direction, an overarching plan for humanity. It prioritizes unethical practices, and it doesn't support the lack of present movement awareness or environment for profit. It only lacks the environment for profit. So before I continue, I was going to say, I'm going to take a little bit of a breather. I am going to answer questions right now. If there's been anything that has popped up at all, just so, because I know that was a lot. I didn't really think about that until I just read it all.
Charity, can I just invade for 1 second?
Uh-huh.
Excuse just want to say that I know Charity is sharing from her point of view and her belief system. And so I know that some of the things that she might have shared there might not resonate with you, and that is absolutely fine. We have no expectation that everyone believes the same thing. So if you need to pop out, we totally get that. So let me just say that before we open it up to questions. Okay. Anyone have any questions? I haven't seen any pop up.
Okay, great. All right, I'm gonna continue on then because I'm gonna compare this through history of the last time this was. Now, like I said, it takes a while for these crosses to go through. So the cross of the sleeping phoenix, and it was actually the penetration and the cross of the sleeping phoenix were switched. So when we were transferring into this, and this was around the 1269 to 858 BC. So what happened during that time? Now it's going to express itself a little differently because penetration was at the forefront with the cross of the sleeping phoenix behind this, right? But during this time, there was a breakdown in the locks in relation to these events. It covers a really kind of dynamic era of ancient history because the late bronze collapse was a huge deal. They don't, I mean, it's kind of, it's an interesting, it happened very rapidly. They believe it was like this, kind of like a ripple effect of underwater volcanoes that caused a bunch of earthquakes because the Bronze Era was like this kind of, it was the Mediterranean and Near Eastern kind of world experiences that like fell through a very short time period and made them vulnerable to attack. And then, so everything, the whole Bronze Era, everything, all these communities and civilizations that were built during that time got destroyed and invaded, and it collapsed the entire Bronze Era. And then after that, though, did come with the rise of the Iron Age, which again, I mean, that's how the kind of the cross of the sleeping phoenix is, right? Like it has to break down the structures, something new comes through. But also it emerged with the Phoenician expansion, which had to do with like rebuilding of colonies across the Mediterranean and developed the alphabet and which kind of underscores the themes of communication and transformation. Then we have the Assyrian Empire began its rise, which employed military strategies and technologies. But this also led to the destruction of the northern kingdom of Israel. So it amplified the forceful aspect of penetration. Then you have the Greek Dark Ages to Archaic period, and the establishment of the Zhou dynasty in China, which has to do with rule promoting this mandate of heaven and introduces these significant cultural, physiological advancements. Now, if we were to flip this though, like, so to understand, like I said, how this works and when the energies shift, what would it have looked like differently? Well, if we were to flip it, right, it would have been the cross of sleeping phoenix versus the cross of penetration, right? There would have been most likely more of a spiritual and cultural resonance during this time. Like instead of like there would have been driven more of a spiritual transformation instead of this like all these strong invasions and war and all this stuff. It should have been more of an emotional and spiritual transformation that encouraged these societies to undergo these like significant changes. And so, but that Renaissance cultural and spirit didn't happen though until the 14th century, and that was when the vessel of love was in charge. So not the Sphinx, right? So, and there should have been some more, there might have been more rise of a new religious movement, but again, that didn't happen until the time of Jesus Christ, when the locks switched again. And there would have been more, instead of like the Greek Dark Ages, there would have been a more focus on preserving and developing new cultural ideas and kind of set the stage for flowering like the Greek civilization. Sorry, that was that. Okay. Now, if we go back even further, which is really hard to be honest, because it's like there's not a lot on record during this time. Like I said, this was like the birthing of like civilization, but like it could have been prior to that. We just don't know. There's not any evidence of that. But if you want to see how what it was like then versus now during the time of transition, right? So back in so it would have been around 54, 65 BC, give or take 70 to 100 years. Because like I said, it takes time for these shifts to come through. You have the development. Back then, it was like development of agriculture and permanent settlements, because that's when the agricultural era started beginning, where we stopped migrating or moving around. Now it takes that. And this also helps with like, you can see like how this is building civilization, because it was in that quarter of civilization. But now with it being an initiation, right, we're taking the foundation of the civilization, what we already have, and we're growing it through sustainable agricultural, like innovative farming techniques. And you can also see too with like technological advances of how the invention of the plow and wheel back in that day was very revolutionized for that time, but now we have the rise of AI and robotics that are also reshaping our world today. And then it's like Mesopotamia, they laid the groundwork for urban life. Like that was why the civilization started. Like Mesopotamia was considered like one of the first cities per se. But now we're also living in cities, right? So we're promoting these more shifts into these social organizations and infrastructures. Also, we had the development of writing, clay tokens that show different items, and then the seals, like those wax seals, right, to mark ownership. But now in communications, we have this rise of digital and social media. Now we use emojis, which is like, I like to say, the modern versions of hieroglyphics, but and video chat. So that kind of shows like how kind of goes together. Now, as for the 2027 predictions, we have, this has to do in relation to the mutation in the emotional solar plexus. So in my first lecture, I discussed the predictions made and what had manifested up to that point. Now, since then, the last couple of years, I believe we've kind of witnessed more of a significant shift in the way we connect intimately and view relationships in the last couple of years, which puts this like stronger emphasis on the mutation itself that's meant to birth this new species. Now, the continued rise of autism diagnosis directly correlates to the mutation of the 55th gate. And in the first lecture, I was a little bit hesitant talking about this because I wasn't really quite sure. It was a little bit more sensitive during that time, but being neurodivergent has really become very open-minded and talks about a lot on social media. So, and these emerging trends, like Ross spoke of these emerging trends, that because they're going to reflect what the new human or the Rave species will be like. And it's people start to become closer to being born closer to 2027, they will exhibit these characteristics. So when we said before, like the mutation only occurs, like this mutation that's happening is only going to be occurring to people in after 2027. Like none of us are going to have it, but we may carry some of the traits like it. Like if in DNA, like when you have like a genetic disease or something called like a dominant and recessive gene. So let's say like if you have sickle cell, you have to have two recessive genes to have sickle cell disease. But if you only have one of the two genes, and then it's actually resistance against malaria. So in a way, you could look at it as like we might only have one of the two genes. So we're going to exhibit those traits in some way, but we're not going to fully manifest it. And Ra really said, like, in the last couple of generations, especially millennials and Gen Z, and forward, will display autistic traits, especially those connected to the 1949 channel. But he spoke of this as like it not being necessarily by any means a flaw. It was a sign of evolving human potential. It was about these terms of like mental processing and social interactions and emotional stability, because that's what aligns with these Rave children. Now, the modern concept of neurodivergence, including the spectrum of autism, can be viewed as like this gradual adaptation to these impending evolutionary changes that are to come. Now, also with the mutation of that 55th gate involves changes in the prostate, and meaning that men will carry it only. So to understand this, like men will be carrying the mutation that will birth this new species, not women. And because of this, it will lead to male infertility that will phase out Homo sapiens and transition to Rave beings. I'm not saying this is going to happen for sure. Of course, you guys, it's just a prophecy. I'm just explaining what he said. But the mutation in the prostate does produce a specific chemical related to the codon histidine, which involves both the 55th and the 49th gates. So gate 59, which is associated with sexuality and reproductive roles, correlates with these changes. And so Ra hypothesized that Rave beings would not be able to reproduce independently, and that initially Homo sapiens or transitionals, or like who we are now, right, will need to give birth to the Rave children until technology advances to support alternative reproductive methods. He says like the Raves will not be able to reproduce their own offspring. So, and it's kind of like in a way, right? I don't know if you guys have seen the show Sweet Tooth on Netflix, but this is kind of what you could put the concept to, where it's about how these humans give birth to this new species of human and animal hybrids, and then humans are no longer being born like normal humans or whatever you want to call normal, but it's nature's way, and that was nature's way of wiping out the human race, and evolution forcing humankind to accept this new hybrid. And this happens because of a pandemic, which, you know, is a little bit on the nose there, but the pandemic happens where they brought this genetic mutation into a lab and they are testing it, which so it's a really good example of seeing like how the Rave would be reproduced. Now, this process is gradual and it says it will unfold over centuries, and with infertility serving as a mechanism to phase out Homo sapiens. But this is part of the evolutionary process. So it's one thing that has been discussed is that, like I said, it will come through males, like the male will carry the genetic, which I don't really know what that means in the regards to binary or gender relations, because males are why males are born. So without the Y chromosome, I'm not quite sure what that means. But the Rave are supposed to be non-binary. So that could be why that's like the trend of that coming as well, like where that's been more in the focus. But what is unique about that is there has been a rise of infertility in men, which you can see my little stats here. But it's not just like infertility, but it's also sperm count has been going down dramatically in the last few years, and they don't know why. They said that there needs to be more studies on it, and there hasn't been enough studies on it, because when it comes to infertility in like general stereotypical societies, is that it's usually the women, the pressure is put on the woman, so they're always looking for infertility, how to help women, but they haven't really done a lot of research on why or how to help men. But one thing that is interesting is that they said that if the global sperm count continues, right? One said that we will reach infertility by 2045. The World Economic Forum predicted 2060. So it's something, but there's a lot of theories of why this is happening or why the lower infertility is happening, but they think it's mostly due to pollution and chemicals in our water and all that stuff, but they don't really know. Then when we're looking at the other stages of the mutation, so stages 1, 2, and 3, this has a lot to do with connection and relationship. Because one thing is that the emotional solar plexus has to do with our awareness, our emotional awareness in connection to others, but it's going to be becoming more of aware center versus this motor. And now I did a lesson, which I'll drop when I'm done here, but recently on my YouTube channel called Lovebirds and Online Bees, and this talks about what other trends of connections are happening. So I'm not going to go into like all the little details of what's going on in relationships, but if you want, you can check it out for yourself. And I didn't talk about it in a human design aspect. I just talked about it in a more of a scientific aspect. But the whole thing with these, the stage 1 and 55 and 59, this is trying to foster this form of intimacy and emotional awareness. So it's saying that this mutation is going to diminish the traditional focus on sexual desires as it goes into gate 6 and sexual attraction in human relationships. Now, as a result of this, asexuality is becoming more prevalent. And it's also reflecting a move away from like necessary of sexual interaction within relationships. And then the transformation of the 4037 removes the emotional bargain when it comes to relationships. So gate 4037 has to do with this bargain of like, I give you this, you give me that, but usually an emotional aspect. And so it brings a new awareness that kind of transcends like sexual dynamics. And this supports the rise of open relationships, situationships. But of course, as these mutations happen, there's also going to be a negative or shadow expression of this too, which you can see that kind of with the whole concept of situationships, like rise of STDs, like I mentioned already, ghosting, etc. Now I'm not going to dive too much into stage 4, but this has to do with the 1949 channel, and I talked about this in the first lecture. But it has to do with directly about how we eat and our relationship between animals and humans. Like we have this considered bargain of like, we provide you shelter, food, shelter, we take care of you, we make sure you're healthy, and in return you give us food. And so but you can see the breakdown of that too, because we've been questioning a lot about these sustainabilities like grass-fed beef and all this stuff, like how we treat our animals. We're looking at different, even domestication of animals, we're considering them more of a family member, not so much property. So that relationship is going to change dramatically. So if you have now, and I can understand, like, it can be kind of overwhelming to hear a lot of this stuff, especially with the change of relationship, because if you're someone that's really into monogamy and like the fact that this whole mutation is supposed to bring in like this whole concept of like monogamy is going out the window, there's something that to understand that kind of gets lost in this. Like now I said, generations closer to 2027 will be more accepting of the changes, which we know this is to be true because Gen Zs say that they actually prefer situationships over committed relationships. But for everybody else, like for the earlier generations, like I'm kind of like a millennial or a Gen X, or I don't know. I'm in that weird year where they're like, we don't know where to put you. So, but I'm all about monogamy. I want commitment. I want that, right? So, and it's because our brains are not programmed to disconnect. Our chemical makeup drives us towards an intimate connection. Monogamy is considered part of our evolution to survive. So that's why human design came out, was to kind of help like humans, us, and these generations manage the 2027 changes. And so these are people that are meant to play a role in helping us keep our own value systems while integrating the new system, right? So for example, if you have a line 6 in your profile, you are pivotal in helping people transition during this time, or at least the first 68 years of this. And you're meant to guide others through evolving dynamics of relationships, intimacy, integrity, and truth. Because as role models, especially those after age 60, since you've lived through all these different experiences, your life journey has equipped you with understanding the need to mentor others and forming meaningful connections, especially since line 6s tend to look for their soulmates. They want that connection that brings transformation and helps them grow while teaching their partner to grow as well. So if one has to, continue with these paradigms, it would be that finding the connection, but maybe not having the desire to actual marriage, right? Like that's how the balance could be between it. It's like, okay, well, we don't have to get married. We don't have to have the contract. We don't have to bargain, but we are going to be in a committed relationship. We're going to be committed to each other because that's what we value. And that's our principle. And whatever if you are line 6, it may not be too that you're not meant to teach the relationship aspect. It may be that you'd have to look at your chart in itself to see that, but it depends on, what gates you have. And it may be that you may need to bring in new ideas, right? So for example, like if I look at my own chart, I'm a line 6, but as we're shifting into these other incarnation crosses, I also have gate 59 and 53. And that is always activated. So I'm a pure generator of the defined root. So with gate 59, 53, and as a line 6, my role involves fostering new beginnings, transformative and intimate connections, and a visionary approach to the collective change. And with this theme of intimacy and breaking down barriers to create deep connections, on my key part, pun intended, of course, is the facilitating genuine transformative connections between people. I can help break down the social and emotional barriers to teach people to foster deeper understanding of personal or collective context in terms of relationships. And I do this by sharing my life experiences and insights that enable people to understand how these transitions work. And I offer it through a perspective of stability and leadership, like I said, through my YouTube channel. And honestly, like this just isn't in my human design chart. This is also reflected in the gene keys for me and my astrology chart. And I didn't know about human design when I first started Lessons of Charity. And it was really about sharing about relationships, my life experiences around it. And it's something that I've personally and professionally done since my early 20s. So, I mean, even as a child, I did it, but just not in a public format. But as 2027 started creeping closer, right, the drive has become so much stronger for me. And it's like something I'm very passionate about. So I just want to, like I said, I just want to kind of pulse love for those that carry line 6 and these keys, because it can be very humbling and hard to accept that you might have some role to play in this. And I think it puts pressure a little bit. And I just have 2 keys in a line 6, but if whatever gates you have, that means that the people that, if you have gates, you're meant to like play a role in this, in the global cycles, and help manifest the energy within them. Like you're naturally aligned with these processes, like you naturally align with the energy. So you're to drive, like embody the changes that bring behind the gate. So it's about your actions and your ideas, your presence will help catalyze like and support the shifts during the transformations. And it does depend too, like if your gate's active, which is if the gate's in a colored center for you, and also how you're meant to do that, because your own individual circuitry, which if you don't understand human design, I know can be confusing, but you have to look and see if you're supposed to do it on a one-to-one level or on a collective level. Now, if you have a full incarnation cross, like the big thing about this is that you're supposed to embody the complete thematic changes of the cycle, and you have a very significant impact on the collective during this change and evolution, right? So you're meant to be this like catalyst or this leader that directs and guides and shapes and manifests the key changes in the direction of the cycle. And their presence and actions are crucial for actualizing potential and purpose of the cycle while initiating or leading these major shifts of development, which Ari already knows. I'm going to use her as an example of this because Ari has the incarnation cross of the sleeping phoenix. And as I've already explained, that has to do with like initiating this spiritual connection, awakening spiritual practices. And she's doing that by creating a group or a community around spirituality. And she has like three out of the 4 penetration gates as well. So her role, she's got a lot of pressure, and I feel bad. I'm sorry, but she's a great example of how she's using this energy without her even realizing it to manifest these shifts that are coming. Now, if you don't have any of the gates, or you aren't a line 6, or you don't have any of these incarnation crosses, it doesn't mean that you're not special or you don't have your own role, right? It just means that you're more focused on your own personal life and have to worry about the collective. Because with the transits, you're going to feel these energies at some point. Like you probably have a line 6 somewhere in your chart, most likely. I mean, I guess maybe not everybody has it, but I'd be surprised. But this, if you're a reflector, you may not, right? But it's all about being able to balance the energy and knowing how the energy is supposed to work and transition into this time period. It's a pretty, when it comes to the prophecy of this, like Rob made a really strong prediction. I mean, his prediction is a bold one. He's saying like the whole human design system is basically relying on this to be valid. Like if the Rave children aren't born, that means the human design is not true, right? So, and I mean, he's talked about it like this happening, not even something that's like metaphorically, right? So it's really something that's very specific and can be disproven easily by science. And honestly, I'm not surprised that it's talked about more in the media. I mean, there seems to be more media news coverage about whether JFK Jr. is still alive, but we're not talking about anything else. And I understand that Ron knew that it would be hard to get people to believe him. And that's why he gave like 3 specific things to watch for that will prove that this will happen. And one would need to be that proven that neutrinos carry mass, which was proven in 1998 and then reconfirmed in 2010. And he made this claim in the late 80s before this was proven. And then 2 is the existence of the magnetic monopole. And this is a theory in quantum physics. But it hasn't, it was not proven while Ra was still alive. But one study to validate its existence in 2019, and more data and studies have been released this year to show that magnetic monopoles do actually exist. Now, lastly, he would say that we would need to prove reincarnation. And while there's been scientific studies done, it hasn't been scientifically proven yet. But he said that it has to be proven before 2027. And I believe it will, but I'm not going to go into that for time's sakes right now. But so the question is like, is this possible? Like, I mentioned that for a new species, there has to be, you have to understand like how a mutation happens. Is it possible to do this? And I said in the first lecture that in order for this to do this, there has to be reproduction isolation. Like what I mean by that is like, it means that humans have to be separated from each other. Like the environment has to be impactful enough where we're not intermingling with other people. And I thought, well, you can use that for like COVID-19 because we were isolated, we were quarantined, but that isolation wasn't long enough or isolated enough. And this rule honestly isn't exclusive. But there are other ways that it could happen. It could be through genetic mutations, which are these random changes in DNA that lead to new traits. And so over time, like a beneficial mutation can become more common with the population. And then especially if it has some kind of survival or reproductive advantage. And so this is done through that whole concept of natural selection, and where the traits become more dominant and more or less common in a population and that impacts this, like I said, survival. But so a universal consciousness, which is what they believe that the Rave children will have, which is like the Rave children will not be able to sustain life on their own. They have to be around their other Raves. It's about this coming together, and their consciousnesses will be connected. So that could actually significantly enhance human survival. So that would be a possibility because it fosters a strong social bond and collective cooperation. So, and that's actually, these are essential traits for a social species like ours, because throughout history, humans have thrived in groups, and when they exhibit mutual support and collaboration, like research in evolutionary biology and social psychology show that groups that work together are more likely to survive and adapt rather than isolated individuals. I mean, even think about like the blue zone. The blue zones are these like where the centurions live, like where people tend to live past age 100 and very healthy. It's because these communities have these really strong social connections. So this like concept of a universal consciousness could emphasize that and help with the survival of our well-being. Now, Ross states that the mutation's been happening since 1781, but 600 years may still not be long enough. But traditional views of like a species suggest that we could be influenced by rapid changes in our environment too. So as we are still evolving, technology and culture can drive rapid changes in human societies, and these pressures can cause genetic selection pressures, and through diet, healthcare, and reproductive choices, advances in genetic engineering and biotechnology accelerates human evolution. And techniques like CRISPR could be used to edit genes and introduce new traits. And then we have the whole rise of the designer babies, where we choose the child we want to produce versus letting it happen naturally, which is, like playing God. And history has taught us one thing, is that life always seems to find a way when we try messing with it. So now with these environmental changes, it will impact our epigenetics, which can alter DNA sequences and influence our traits. And lastly, like Rod didn't say where the rave would be born, only that the first child is meant to be born on February 15th, 2027. Now, radiation exposure can cause significant mutations in DNA. While, most mutations are harmful or neutral, some could potentially lead to a new trait that would be beneficial in the post apocalyptic environment. So that would drive a rapid evolutionary change that we still don't fully understand, because we don't really know how those impacts have been made, especially with the ones around Hiroshima and Chernobyl. So anyone in those areas may be impacted by this too, and could have some kind of genetic mutation. We don't know. I mean, so to say that could this happen? Yeah, it could happen. I mean, it would be egocentric not to say, and it would be biased just because it appears metaphysical, but it should be something I think that should be taken a little bit more seriously. So what does that look like, and what does that mean? Well, in order for something to be a different species, so we're, like I said, Homo sapiens. For the Homo genius, right, we have to have something that stands out from us. And we know, with the Neanderthals, they had a different brain system, a brain structure, and a digestive system. So that made them a separate species from us. Now, one would be these morphological changes, which has to do with physical traits, such as shape or size or structure. And even though Ra didn't really provide detailed descriptions on what they would look like or their physical appearance, they would have a distinct physiological structure as compared to Homo sapiens, because he said that they would have to have a structure that would support enhanced awareness and sensor abilities. And he did say they were going to be blind, but he did say that the Rave will perceive their environment and interact with others through non-visual means. They're going to be able to see things on a different plane in a way. And it's kind of how a dog views the world differently than a human, right? But they're going to be able to see things that we won't be able to see. And so I would imagine that would make and one thing with that too is that they're not really interested in connecting with humans. And so one part of being a Homo sapien is that the white sclera of our eyes here, because eyes actually have a huge impact on how we communicate with others. So they won't need that. So their eyes may look very different than a Homo sapiens. Another thing is that, or there has to be genetic similarity yet different, right? So like I mentioned about the Neanderthal immune system, its response is to be different than ours. So the Rave should have a difference in their genetic makeup, in their nervous system, but they should still have similarities to a Homo sapien. There has to be a little bit of a difference. So you'd have to look at the amino acids that connect to those gates. Another one, reproduction, isolation, I kind of mentioned this, but this isn't more in regards to mating, because species are considered separate if they cannot interbreed successfully, or if their offsprings are sterile, like when a donkey mates with a horse, it creates a mule, but that mule is usually non-fertile. But this is very, very rigid in thinking this, because we know already that we can reproduce with offspring, right? I mean, different species. I mean, we produced with Neanderthals, and we had viable offspring, and they reproduced as well. So that this is one of those, it's kind of more of an old school version of it, but there is something with like I said, the Rave, they don't know how they're going to, Rod didn't know how they're going to reproduce, because like I said, it takes 3 of them to come together to be alive. So he was like, I'm not sure how they're going to be able to reproduce like that. But that's why he believed that us Homo sapiens will be the ones that birth them. As for behavioral, another one is behavioral traits, and they already know that they will have a lack of desire for seeking knowledge, because they're already going to have this universal consciousness. They're not going to be able to. They're going to tap into that kind of, Akashic records kind of environment. They're already going to have all this knowledge. They don't need it. And they're also going to have this social detachment from humans, because they're not going to be interested in communicating with us, because we're not going to communicate the same way. Another one is ideological niches, which the Rave children are thought to be very sensitive to their surroundings, and they are going to be requiring this harmonious supportive system to develop their full potential. So that includes physical, social, and energetic aspects of their environment. So And one thing too that I find really interesting is that there's a whole new science, that a field of science called interpersonal neurobiology that studies how we connect through the brain. And it only came out in like 1990, but they've been studying how we communicate, like on a how it affects our consciousness stuff. And I talk about this in lesson 8 of my channel. But I just think it's kind of ironic that field came out. And then if these children were to be born, this field would be the leadership of like understanding how they are connecting. So okay, so I hope that's kind of how I have it. Wow, that went right up to the time. But so I just want you to understand, like, the reason why human design came out was to help human Homo sapiens transition through these changes as we go into these new crosses, and also to how it will impact you directly. So if you guys are interested in a reading and wanting more information on, whether it be what does that mean for me, or do I have these gates? How am I supposed to impact myself, or the purpose of 2027? Any of that, you're welcome to book a reading. If not, no stress, but I'm offering a promo code of 30% off through the end of July. And then anybody that, since this will be on YouTube, if it's after July, I'm still going to offer 15% off, because I think the last video we had a lot of people watch it and they were curious about that. Also, I ask, please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, because I will be putting up more videos on there. I've started putting some lessons on there slowly, but I'm going to be putting more courses towards human design. So if you're more interested in learning it that way, you can. And I will continue with that as time goes on.
And let me just say real quick, while Charity breathes for a second, I will say, and I know Charity is my friend, so you might all see this bias, but Charity's reading, human design reading with me, changed my life. It really was a understanding of why I am the way I am and certain things that I do in my life. And to be completely blunt, my brain cannot comprehend everything on human design because it is certainly complicated. And so to have somebody who understands my chart, who I can tap in with and figure out what's going on, has been just wonderful. So thank you, Charity, for sharing your gift with us for sure.
Okay,
All right.
over time. I don't know if there's any questions, like last quick questions I could answer. I know that was a lot, and that was a lot.
I would highly suggest that you guys go and sign up for Charity's newsletter. Is that what you call it, Charity? On lessonsofcharity.com. You can get lots more information. She does break things down into smaller bite-sized chunks on her YouTube channel. So make sure that you are following that, and also follow the Awkwardly Zen YouTube channel, just because it helps us all out. Anybody have any questions? I'm going to wait for just a second. Okay. Jude, go ahead.
Would you repeat the name of the book that you just said was written in the 1990s?
I didn't know.
She was talking about a study in the 1990s. Is that what you mean, Jude?
I guess so. But it was
Okay.
had a title. I thought that perhaps I could find it. That's okay.
I don't remember mentioning that.
What was the study about, Charity? Because maybe she could just Google it. In the
I don't know what
90s.
this is referring to. I'm sorry.
You said there was a study in the 90s about.
All I have is, and I captured it incorrectly, interpersonal human biology.
Interpersonal neurobiology. That's
Neuro.
actually a field. You can get a book on it. It's called Interpersonal Neurobiology. I talk about it in lesson 8. I mean, it's literally like a 20-hour lecture on the whole scientific field. So if you want, I would recommend, I have the book. I put the link for lesson 8 in there. I have the book for that, a link for it in my notes of that video. So if you want a direct link, I would go there. It's called, I forget what it's called, but I think it's called literally Interpersonal Neurobiology.
Thank you very much.
Perfect. All right. Any other questions? That was a lot of information for sure. I understand that. Oh, wait. Piwi Ling? Piwu, I believe is your name, right?
Yeah. Charity, you talked about the male infertility. Is female infertility also rising?
No, actually, that he doesn't talk about that at all. It's only because of the mutations happening in the prostate, and women do not have prostates. So that's why it's directly impacting men. But we would become infertile if we don't have the other part of that, I guess. I mean,
right. Thank you.
All right, Laura.
Thank you, love. Charity, thank you so much for your transmission. Sending you lots of love from Ireland. Thank you. A quick question. What is the role of the 5-1 in 2027?
the what? I'm sorry?
5-1.
The role A
Oh,
5-1,
a five
the role
one.
of the 5-1 profile.
Well, 5-1s actually, you're more about this now. I mean, I have to look at the rest of your chart to know because your profile is just like how your the script that you get. But I will say one thing with 5-1s is that, this has to do more with like reincarnation. I think that you guys will play kind of a role in that because 5-1s have the most karma per se in regards to past lives, like whether you believe in that or not, so it's totally up to you, but in a way where it's like you're the closest to your past lives, and you're every person that you meet, everything that you do has some kind of connection to a past life. So if there was a role that you guys were meant to play without even looking at your chart, I would say like that may have something to do with it, because if that field does get proven, you guys would probably be one of the first profiles that could do some like regression and stuff like that, where it's like researching that information.
All right. We had 2 5-1s here. Kimberly was also a 5-1. Uh, all right. Any last questions? Okay, you guys can find Charity on lessonsofcharity.com. You can also find her on YouTube and Lessons of Charity, also on the Awkwardly Zen YouTube. She has her own playlist there that we try to make sure that we're updating with her videos. So you can check that out along with all of our other partners. Feiwu has one more question. Go ahead, Feiwu.
What about 2-4 manifesting generator, emotional authority?
Well, like I said, it's hard. I would have to know your gates and stuff like that to say, because 2-4s are also not a line 6 or 1, but just in general, I would say, well, sorry, Ari. I'm like 2-4s always remind me of cult leaders a little bit, but
I'm a 2-4 Feiwu.
but no, but it's a good example, like kind of like leadership through a network of people. But it means that you do have some kind of natural ability depending on those gates. So if you have any of you guys want to look more so when it comes to the profiles, it's like these are just roles. Unless you're a 6, like I wouldn't worry too much about your profile. It's more about the gates. So if you carry any of the gates of the incarnation crosses, so of any of the locks, so that's the incarnation cross and the vessel of love, the incarnation cross of the Sphinx, incarnation cross of the sleeping phoenix, and the incarnation cross of penetration. So that's 16 gates. Wow, I hate math. So if you have one of those 16 gates, that's what you want to look at, because that's the energy that you're going to kind of relate to and how it's supposed to be expressed. And if you have one of those 4 incarnation crosses, it means that that's even a bigger impact. Like you're supposed to really kind of take a leadership role and really integrate yourself with collective and societies.
Go ahead, Feiwu.
I remember it was right angle, cross of Eden something.
Oh yeah, the incarnation. A lot of people have that cross, right? Cross of Eden. That's not, it doesn't, those are not, that's 36, 11, 12, and I believe, I can't remember the last, well, I don't even know how I remember that actually, but I'm actually impressed with myself on that one, because there are, like I said, 798 different ones. But I will say that it doesn't have to be the incarnation cross. So I'm saying those 16 gates it could be in Pluto, it can be in Jupiter, it can be whatever planet. You just want to look for those 16 gates. It doesn't have to be the same incarnation cross, but the incarnation cross of Eden does not include any of those 16 gates, from what I believe. I could be wrong on that. I have to double check. How are folks getting their profile without her assistance? Oh, you can go to Genetic Matrix does a free one. There's also like human design I think it's Diz or human design.des or whatever. I talk about that one in like the environmental video that I have on my YouTube channel. There's another where you can get these free, you get free charts very easily. So there's tons of different ones. It's like apps and stuff. When it comes to the apps, so that have these kind of like preconceived write-ups, I always say like, just take that with a grain of salt, because some of them they change and some people don't. They look at it more from a general aspect. It doesn't talk about the interplay between everything.
Beautiful. All right. And again, I would highly suggest, if you look at that chart and your eyes go crossed like mine do, that you give Charity a call and book a session with her, because she's astounding. And I appreciate that. And also, you guys, like, her brain, if you have not figured this out, holds on to stuff unlike anything I've ever experienced. So it's really beautiful because she can tap in at any time. So Thank you so much, Charity, for your knowledge and all of that information and your examples, and also for sharing so much on YouTube as well. It's such a beautiful thing that you are sharing for free out there. So thank you all so much for being here and respecting Charity's time and her energy and her education. And we will see you next time.
Bye, guys.